A word about the process we use. York Counts, as I mentioned, is an initiative of the Community Foundation, and York Counts appointed our work group to study this issue of how to improve education for all students in York City, to study this issue and to come back to it with a recommendation that would then be forwarded on to the board of the Community Foundation. I think I mentioned last time I was with you right at the start of this process that the Community Foundation and York Counts had teed this up by commissioning a report by Ron Cowell of the Education Policy and Leadership Center to examine a series of ideas that were held forth as ways that we might accomplish that mission of improving education for all of the students in the city of York. So as we started our work group's effort, we had that report as a resource to use. My job, and I have to confess that I was somewhat apprehensive about this at the start, my job was to figure out how to lead this group of people who are all very capable, highly opinionated people, they tend to go together, how to lead this group of people in a thoughtful way through this material, through Ron Cowell's report, while at the same time bringing our own experience to bear on the situation and coming back with a recommendation. My goal, I think our goal by the time we started our work together, was to go up to the edge of the cliff in terms of an aggressive recommendation, but not jump off. In other words, we wanted a recommendation that was bold and aggressive, that had a chance of making a really significant difference, but by the same token, actually met that test of we could do this in this community more or less with our own power. The work group included former Congressman Platts, Mayor Bracey, Bob Woods, Don Berkins, and Pat London, Sue Krebs, Michael Newsom, Bill Hartman, Jane, and Lauren Crow, who I should mention chairs York Counts. I have to say that from apprehensive at the start, this ended up being one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had leading this group. This was a tremendously thoughtful group of people who you couldn't find a group of people who care more deeply about kids in the city of York. These are folks who are taxpayers in the city, professional educators whose kids went to city schools, people who have volunteered for decades with the city school district, people who themselves were graduates of William Penn, or people like Bob Woods who have dedicated a good part of their careers to early childhood education and to education issues and to community improvement. It was an awesome group of people, and I really felt honored to have the ability to work with them. So the reality of the current crisis in the city school district. The first three of these bullets have been pretty well documented. I hope I don't need to convince you that those three things exist at this point. I want to say something about the bottom two bullets because they have been less commented upon, and it really became clear very early that we needed to be the people. Honestly, if we were going to make a difference, we needed to be the people to raise our hands and say, you know, we have a deeper institutional problem beyond just these first three things. Number one, a lack of stable governance. This is a school district that at the last election could not get enough candidates to run for all the seats, has had 2 or 3 seated school board members resign, another one been asked to leave, and a district that has been through 4 superintendents in 10 years, and without any commentary whatsoever on any one of those 4 individuals. You cannot define an organization that's had 4 executive leaders in 10 years as an organization with stable leadership. And so that issue of stable governance and the ability to get the best and the brightest people to make a long-term commitment to leading this district and to replace those who have to leave, that's a big deal. And then the second thing, to some degree an offshoot of the first 4, is a lack of community confidence in the district. And it's painful to say it. I've been a city taxpayer for 25, 26 years now. Sent our kids to city schools for a good portion of that time. And to have to say that the community has lost confidence in our school district is a painful conclusion, but it had to be said. It has to be said over and over, and it's true. And it's a big deal. It drove, and this is a group of people, again, who don't conclude this lightly, okay? It drove and it underlies a lot of work, the other work and the conclusions that we reached. A couple other things that we concluded pretty early on, or that were bedrocks to our work. The first of all, that we needed systemic improvements that benefit all students. This wasn't just about helping a good number of students, or a recommendation that was sort of likely to help a good number of students. We were really trying to drive something that had at least a chance of being system-wide, of not relying on any one individual to make it work, not waiting for Superman, to use that phrase, which has kind of come in vogue in the education field. We wanted something that was actually transformative of the entire district. Not a program, not an initiative, not something that relied on grant funding for 3 years, something that was much more systemic than that. Second of all, we want a district that is not just better but great. We have very little patience for comparing our city school district to other failing school districts and saying, well, we're not the very, very worst in the state. We want to be comparing our city school district to the surrounding districts in York County, to the best school districts in the state and the country. And finally, it was very clear that we have to galvanize community leadership. I talked about community confidence in the district and how that has been lost. It's pretty clear that this is not just a problem that professional educators or even elected officials are responsible for. This is a problem that everybody is responsible for. If we care about the future of the greater York community, forget the city, but the entire greater York community, this is a problem that everybody has to care about and get engaged in. We needed a solution that would do that, and we needed a model of engagement, an institution, a transformed institution that people would have enough belief in that they would be willing to invest their time and their emotional energy and perhaps their money. Now, I mentioned the Education Policy and Leadership report that Ron Cowell did. We needed another way, a screen, to take the information that Ron had given us and to compare all of the alternatives in a systemic way or in an organized way across a series of criteria. And this is what we came up with from what we learned. And I should also say we drew on the work of Dr. Diokis, who some of you probably heard at the Community Foundation's annual meeting last year, who has done a lot of research on excellent high-poverty schools. And there were really 6 things that we drew from her work and from Ron's work and our own experience as elements of great schools. And not ironically, these are, you could also title this elements of great organizations, frankly, nonprofit, private, you name it. Number 1, visionary and inspired leadership over an extended period of time. This is not a 1, 3, 5-year kind of initiative here. This is 15 years as the starting point. If we're not committed to this for 15 years, we shouldn't start. And we need that visionary and inspired leadership that is likely to be sustained. Doesn't have to be the exact same person or people, but the same kind of leadership with the same vision over a sustained period of time. Second of all, evidence-based educational approaches that have sustained focus on student achievement. The evidence-based part ought to be obvious, but this also goes to the point of it can't be a flavor of the month, flavor of the year, flavor of the every 2 years. It's a grant-funded program we're going to try in one school from one university kind of thing. That the schools that have shown real success have that sustained evidence-based educational approach. Third, accountability and rewards that are aligned with what the organization is trying to accomplish. This is Human Resources 101. That accountability and rewards for the workforce have to be aligned with what the organization is trying to accomplish, with what matters to the organization. Fourth, effective and collaborative management on the front lines. This is building principals and other frontline administrators out in school buildings, collaborating with teachers and other professional and support staff. Fifth, full engagement of families and community. I think most people understand why that is so important. And finally, ongoing adequate and stable financial resources, and fortunately that's David's problem, not ours. I should say a word about that, however, that we were wrestling with this ongoing adequate and stable financial resources early on in our work, and I say it sort of jokingly, but we did punt on that one. The more professional way of putting that is David's work really supplanted ours. He has an assignment, he has authority from the state, resources in his work that are well beyond anything our work group ever could have had. He'll be talking about those. And so we really did, in fact, defer to him and say, we can't be terribly useful in that because there are people smarter and better resourced than we are in working on that. We're really going to focus on a model for academic achievement. So our vision, what does a transformed, effective city school district look like? Number 1, the transformation of the district into a system of what we're saying in quotation marks, academies, tailored to suit different learning styles, and that students have the flexibility to attend the academy or the school that best suits their needs without regard for geographic limitations. In a way, the move to the K-8 school buildings really has helped support this, because now you have kids now you have a district really where kids have to make two choices: a school to go to for the K-8 period, and then they go to a high school. So what we're really focused on here is different kids learn in different ways. We have an opportunity to create programming and buildings that suit different needs, and then to give students the opportunity to attend those. Second, our vision includes massive and enthusiastic support for schools from civic leaders, from businesses, from nonprofit agencies, from colleges and universities, and from parents. Third, that we're using the best national educational model and organization. There are a lot of really smart people in this country who are totally committed to educating kids in high poverty schools effectively. They're out there. We need to find a way to get those people to York. Fourth, we need energized and empowered principals and teachers. In our model, our vision includes comprehensive and coordinated support for students to overcome obstacles to success. This is all about addressing all of the things that happen outside of the 6.5 hours a day that kids are in a school building that have such a huge impact on their ability to be successful in life. And finally, that concentration of poverty begins to be diminished. In looking at the alternatives, there were 7 of them that Ron Cowell presented to us. We narrowed it to 2 that we thought met, that at least had the chance to meet all 6 criteria and to deliver our vision. The first was what we call inside reform, that is essentially doing a better job with the institution we have. And second of all, this 100% charter system. I do want to make one comment about consolidation because it was one of the things we looked at, and we've been mildly criticized at least for being too timid in not recommending consolidation of school districts across greater York, if not all of York County. I think there are a lot of individual committee members who believe that there could be some benefits in the long term for city kids in consolidation. But let's be really clear about 2 things. Number one is there is no mechanism for forced consolidation. It would be voluntary under any conceivable model in this state with the current Constitution. And second of all, it is not a panacea. It doesn't make anything happen automatically. There are very big school districts with plenty of money operating crummy schools in high poverty neighborhoods, okay? So consolidation does not in and of itself change a thing about the academic performance of our city school building. You would have to still do many, many, many of the kinds of things we're talking about here to start to make a difference. So there are, I mean, as a city taxpayer, I would love it if we could equalize tax burden across the greater York area. That'd be great. Okay, but that doesn't automatically do anything to the cost of educating kids, and it certainly doesn't do anything automatically to the ability of students in the existing City of York School District to be successful. Our conclusion, this chart is in the report, which is on the Community Foundation website if you're interested in reading the whole thing. I'm not going to read this chart to you. I will simply say that we concluded, this is the kind of applying those criteria to this inside reform model. Our conclusion is that this is what we've been trying for the last 10 to 15 years with very little to show for it. It doesn't address the governance issue. It's not plausible to us that in the absence of more transformative action, that the district can be transformed from the inside. And let me be clear, that is not a commentary on the current leadership. It's more of a commentary on the situation we have inherited through the last 15 years or so of erosion of the district. The institutional barriers, in our mind, are simply too great to this inside reform model being effective, and the pace is too slow. It will not energize anybody, in our opinion. That's why we really had to conclude that this community charter school model that we've come up with is the better alternative. Let me be clear about now what this model looks like. In this model, a district would remain in control of who is educating the students of the City of York. They would deliver that education in a different way. They would deliver that education by putting out requests for proposal that invited the best national and could be local charter operators to come into the City of York and operate the school buildings and educate the children who are in those school buildings. The district is perfectly capable in this model, if it can have a governance system that can be corrected, of staying as involved as it wants to in the actual kind of long-term policy strategic priority setting for the district. it just simply would not be directly involved with its employees in the business of educating children in the classroom. So we're not talking about simply an extension of the existing charter school model in York, which has had some notable successes and some notable failures as well. We're talking about a different way of envisioning what the district relationship with charter schools looks like. And we believe, and again, I'm not going to read you the chart, it's in the report, we believe that this model is much more likely, there's no guarantee, but it's much more likely to actually meet these 6 criteria. You can envision it happening through the process of bringing these folks in. So the recommendation in terms of the actual operating model is this district-wide community charter schools. We've said nonprofit. There are debates among those who are very educated and have researched the subject. There are debates about the for-profit versus the nonprofit model. We don't have to have those here today. We're recommending, however, that those debates would be a distraction and that we ought to just focus on the nonprofit model. And that those nonprofit charter schools would serve 100% of the students in the district. There's a second part of this recommendation which has to do with community schools, which I want to talk about a little more in a few minutes. And it should be really clear that we believe that the communities in schools, that community schools using the communities in schools model or an equivalent quality approach is really vital, whether we do it with an all-charter system, an inside reform system, consolidation, whatever. We believe this is an extremely important part of the recommendation. So there's no denying that this community has experienced 15 years of conflict around charter schools. And this is at least partially because our state has a charter law in terms of how charters get approved, how they can appeal, how they are held accountable, and how they are funded. We have a charter system and a charter law that virtually guarantees conflict. It invites conflict between charters and their chartering districts. And unfortunately, what has happened is some of the most passionate advocates for children in the city over the last 15 years have been divided into pro-charter and anti-charter camps. So it's almost been as if, hey, once you become an advocate for a particular charter school, once you get on that board, once you give one of them money, once you start working on that, you're now the opposition to the existing city district. And that's really unfortunate that has happened. It's also the case that with the notable exception of New York Academy School, which was in fairness embraced by the district, by the city district, and chartered with little conflict by the city district, that charters really have been viewed as competition by the city district, and we think that should change. So because of that conflict in York, there has been very little attention paid to what actually makes charters work well nationally, where they work, and to what conditions have led to less successful results, because they don't work everywhere, and not every charter school works. So little thought has been given to that, and little thought has been given to how charters can be used as a tool to attract and engage and empower organizations and parents in a community like York, where it's so clear that the status quo is not accomplishing what it is that we desire for our kids. Just a couple words on charter performance. There are charter schools in the city of York that appear to be underperforming the city school district. There are charter schools in almost every city in the country that appear to be underperforming their public school districts with the direct instruction. There are also charter schools in York that appear to be outperforming the city district, and there are charter schools nationally that significantly outperform the equivalent publicly operated, directly instructed schools. In Baltimore, as an example, and it's hard to see every detail of these slides, they're all in the report. In Baltimore, for example, there are charter schools across all grades that are outperforming the directly operated Baltimore City schools by statistically significant measures. In Pittsburgh, there's an organization called Propeller Charter Schools, which is a network of 8 nonprofit charters. They now serve over 2,400 students, and those students in their schools exceed statewide averages on test scores, period. Not just among urban schools, not just among poor schools, but all students statewide. One interesting note is that York City students are currently testing at the same point that Propel students started at 6 years ago. In New Orleans, that's a model that's gotten a lot of attention because we cited it in the report and we drew from some research on the work in New Orleans post-Hurricane Katrina. But it's pretty clear that that district, which has been in state receivership since 2005, it's moving towards 100% charter system. And as you can see, those test scores are getting much closer to their peers across the state in Louisiana. As a contrast, in New York City, students are 26 percentage points behind their statewide peers. And finally, KIPP charter schools, KIPP stands for Knowledge is Power, in DC and in Baltimore perform better than traditional public schools. The other thing I do want to circle back to for a minute is this community schools approach, because I just cannot emphasize how important this is. We are not talking about feel good, let's get the parents involved stuff here. Okay, that is not what community schools is about. Community schools, and in this case, the Communities in Schools National Model, which is what this chart, again, in the report and on their website, what this really illustrates is a disciplined, research-based, comprehensive system to making the school the center of the community and bringing to bear all of the available resources on the students in that district to give them a seamless network of community support to address the problems that are interrupting any particular family or child's ability to learn successfully. A significant part of the community in schools approach is to lengthen the amount of time that these students are spending in their school building. So even if the school day is still 6.5 or 7 hours of direct instruction, in these buildings, the students are in the buildings for 9 to 10 hours a day, with before and after school activity that is more supportive of learning and homework and that kind of environment than sitting at home watching television or standing on the street corner or in a park playing basketball. So Communities in Schools is a coordinated effort to engage the strong specialized agencies in the community to address these obstacles that get in the way of learning. Typically, there is a professional in every school building who is responsible for doing that on a building-by-building basis. This costs money. It would cost per school about what it costs to house 2 inmates at the York County Prison for a year. So, as a contrast, we think it's a really good investment. So, keys to success, 6 elements that we'd like to see in successfully implementing our recommendations. Number 1, this massive community engagement. We keep using that word, but it is truly what it is going to take to make this happen. Number 2, addressing the flaws in the state charter funding and accountability model that have led to so much conflict. We believe that the City of York's special status now is being in recovery status. We believe that it is possible to use our status to make that happen. Third, at the same time, we need an accountability system for charter operators that is also far more functional than the current one. Now, the RFP process gives us, to a great degree, the ability to do that because we can create our own accountability system based on some of the best models nationally and build it into those requests for proposals and therefore build it into the charters. We also think it wouldn't hurt to get some legislative reform in that area as well. Again, we think that can be accomplished. A change in mindset that charters are not the enemy. A change in mindset by the district that charters are not the enemy, but that in fact charters are a valuable delivery system. Number 5, we have got to find a way to address this governance issue. Our recommendation is that the CRO and his advisory committee essentially write themselves into the recovery plan and stay involved over a long period of time to help see the district through this charter transition and well beyond. So it doesn't mean the school board wouldn't exist any longer, but the school board would essentially embrace the notion of a partnership with the CRO and a community advisory committee that would have real power, because if they write themselves into the recovery plan and give themselves certain roles, and the board embraces that, they essentially become a body that has real authority within the district. And then finally, last but not least, through this transition period, not losing the gains that we do seem to have achieved in the short term in the city district in terms of test scores and some of the programs that have been implemented in the last 2 or 3 years in the time that Dr. Wolf has been with us. So, kind of in conclusion, massive change is really what we need. Massive sweeping change is what we need. We need a level of community engagement that can't be achieved unless these potential community partners see a revolutionary, successful outcome.
That's your signal, Eric.
And the lights go out, yeah. But that's good, I only have 2 bullets left. Third, again, we don't believe that this can be achieved through inside reform. We think that the community and the public has lost too much confidence in the governance, the governors, if you will, of our school district and in the district itself. And so we believe the solution that beats the test is to convert the district into this 100% community charter district. And I think I should probably go straight to Dave and then questions after that. So, David, you're on.
Just have a little time check here. How long would someone like me to speak before opening up for questions? 15 is fine. It's sort of ironic that we're meeting here today. Meg Brubaker, to me, is one of my heroes, maybe to all of you, perhaps for somewhat different reasons. Number one, she convinced me that my child really should be in preschool. That was quite a spell. Number two, the preschool that Meg was involved with did a great job for not only our kids and our family, but number three, this is an example of a lifelong commitment to taking that and really turning it in and institutionalizing it for the benefit of the community. It's also interesting, as I'm going to talk in a second, about maybe who she is, who the customers are, and is this a community effort or is it a neighborhood effort? Just keep that thought in mind. Second point is, I think York is blessed because of not only the Community Foundation, but because of the Community Foundation, but the huge community effort. So when Act 141, which created this whole recovery process, started, the York community has been working on this diligently for probably 20 years. I've been involved with the York Town's effort. I've been involved with the Community Foundation, and many, many volunteers in the community have. So we didn't start from scratch. I didn't start from scratch because of this terrific community effort. And I think that is going to turn out to be a huge edge for the York community and how this all evolves. Act 141, we can talk about how, why, how bizarre it is, and these peculiarities in it, but I take a very simple point of view. I'm here, we got Act 41, how can we use it? I start from the very basic premise that I'm convinced there's nothing that is more important to this community than upgrading the school district and city of York. Everything flows from that. Property values, education, safety, everything comes from that. So regardless of how we got here, let's take this as an opportunity. Having said that, let me circle back and say, as this thing started to evolve, and people would say, well, it's going to be a little bit of an awkward meeting, isn't it? The first time when you go into the school district of the city of York and say, here, I'm here to help you. And I thought about that. The first time I met with the school board, and the first time I had a public meeting, which approximately maybe 4 people attended the public meeting on an important subject. My opening was, if I were sitting in your shoes there, I would look at me and say, why in the world would they send someone who looked like me to come here and help me? And my segue from that was, school district, the city of York, has a building called Alexander Good. And in fact, I've been very active in the 4 chaplains for many different reasons. But the message of the 4 chaplains wasn't about a Jewish rabbi, it wasn't about a Catholic priest, it was about diversity and coming together. So as we look at this process, and we look at an advisory committee, and we look at York Day Nursery, it's not a neighborhood group, it's a community group. And it's my belief that that diversity is the strength of solving problems. I will tell you that is not a universal view. And there are many folks that have said to me, if not directly, indirectly, you're not one of us. What are you doing here? And when we talk about solutions, and we talk about Eric's suggestion of an advisory board continuing, there's a fair amount of pushback to that. That's our school district. So that's the backdrop of how we start out here. I'm going to try and get the right one here. We've talked about Act 41. Eric really made these points. These points are all here. Why the school district in the city of New York is unique in the problems that we have. And Eric really went through all of those. Basically, we have the lowest dollars per real estate per student by far. The red arrow is always the school district of the city of New York. Poverty is high, way out of the bounds of the other school districts. Those other ones that are high are the charter schools, by the way. They're not the public schools. Millage rate, for those of you who have property in the school district. And Genevieve, Don Burkin, some others, this Reaching Higher group that came together in 2011. Again, evidence that people have been working on this issue for a long time. This is a pretty telling chart here. The enrollment, potential enrollment for the school district of the city of New York is actually going up. 2007 to 13, 7,500 to 7,600. So the enrollment in the district has actually gone up. But because the charter schools have gone from 1,000 to 2,400 in that period, the district schools have gone from 6,200 down to 4,800. And because of the issues with the funding formula, that's huge. The other thing I will point out, some unique aspects, special education students, 21%. That's a very high number relative to other public schools in the county. Homeless, we don't have an exact count, somewhere around 161. ELL, free and reduced, all high statistics relative to other districts. This is a baseline. Let me back up a little bit. PFM is the consulting group that was assigned to this project by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And PFM is a national firm that does analysis and research. One of the first things we looked at is say, well, what if we do nothing? You know, maybe this is just a temporary problem. Well, if we do nothing, in fact, by 2017, we will have an annual $20 million budget deficit. My first board meeting, the school district of the city of New York, I became aware in 2 hours, it took me 2 hours to find a business administrator, but after I found a business manager, I said, how are we doing? And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, what's our starting fund balance? How much are we going to lose or make this year? What's our ending fund balance? He looked me right in the eye, and he said, we have a minus $4 million fund balance, we're going to lose $4 million, we're going to end up with a minus $8 million fund balance. And I will tell you, at that point in time, I don't think there was a single member of the board who was aware of that. So the question that comes back from the board is, well, this is maybe a lot to do about nothing. It is not a lot to do about nothing. We have a huge financial issue. The debt structure, many of us in here in this room, we borrow against assets. School districts don't borrow against assets. They can borrow anything they want. If they lose $20 million, they can do a 30-year bond and spread that $20 million worth of loss over 30 years and hamper the district. The school district in the city of York has $136 million outstanding, most of it from losses. So where I started was to say, well, let's figure out where we are. What kind of condition are we in? Because if we don't know where we're starting, we can't set a target for where we want to go. We really can't find out how we're going to get there. And Act 141 was based upon money, financial distress. From the first conversation I had with the Secretary of Education, I said, I don't really see it that way. Because you can fix costs, but if it's at the expense of health and safety and it's the expense of education, what have we done? That's really a really ill-formed concept. So I said, I will engage in this process, but the only way we're going to engage is if it's a threefold variable: educational soundness, health and safety, and sustainable finances. So we divided these metrics into education, health and safety, and finance. And this is work that the advisory committee has done, and basically achievement scores compared to our peers are okay, peers being inner city failing schools. The advisory committee said that's not really what we want to be. We want to be state average. That is roughly 80 compared to 35. You can look down through there and you can see a whole bunch of different things: student engagement, graduation rate, but are each of these perfectly correct? No. But in total, does this give a sense of where the district is? And I would say absolutely it does. In terms of health and safety, one of the things that Eric mentioned was this hours per day in school or community programs. It's a key indicator for an urban district how this is all going to happen. We should be at 9, we're at 7. Then we have some safety incidents, and I will also say that part of this is getting accurate data. And some of the data has, we've gotten different signals here and there to support that. Polk Lepson has done a safety survey, and we have a charter school survey that's coming up as well. But the ending conclusion is we are not particularly a safe school district relative to where we want to be. And in fact, my conversations with the police department would certainly confirm that, and my conversations with teachers would confirm that. The financials, suffice it to say, we've got a deficit that's going to get bigger. We need to do something. So, sound effective education, safe and healthy learning environment, sustainable finances, and the advisory committee added the fourth category of ease of implementation. Because we can say, well, this is what we need to do, but if it really isn't feasible, that's not where we want to go. The advisory committee came up with 5 options about a month ago, and the 5 were 100% charter schools, and that was not only based upon Community Foundation presentation, which they made prior to this, it was, as people look at this, that's an option. Community and schools model, consolidation, transform school districts, which is the internal model, and advocating for state legislative change. I want to be very clear about this slide. All of these other slides have been shown to the advisory committee and are part of our website. Tomorrow night, the advisory committee will be starting to wrestle with this, but this is my personal evaluation. So this is not just to get this conversation going. But what the advisory committee did do is narrow it to 3. 100% charter, consolidation, internal option. And they took the community and schools model and the advocating at a state level of saying, those are kind of at the side. We need to do this community and schools regardless, exactly what Eric said. He said it better than I did. Advocating for state legislative change, we need to do that, but it's not the answer. If we look out 4 years and say we need $20 million to balance the budget, that ain't going to happen with state legislative change. So I'm going to walk through each of these, and I'm going to kind of start in the middle, consolidation. I came to this process with a strong preference for consolidation. For God's sake, David Russ, concentration poverty, what are we talking? Let's get this over and done with. Let's move on. Well, as I started to learn more, you hear things like Woodland Hills out in Pittsburgh. And as a matter of fact, at our meeting tomorrow night, PFM has given a little white paper on that. Woodland Hills outside of Pittsburgh, and there's some actually local folks who have had some experience there, pretty similar. It was federally mandated, but the result was the same. They basically took York Suburban, School District of the City of York, Central, and West York, 4 districts, merged them, and it was a disaster on all fronts. Higher costs, lower achievement scores, property values went down. Okay, let's think that through. I did the math. School District of the City of York has a 90% poverty rate. Suburban has roughly 17. If you average the 3 districts, excluding the School District of the City of York, 27. We have an educator in the room. If all of a sudden you push a button and the average goes from 27 to 58% poverty because of the numbers, How does that change the district? Significantly, and probably not for the better, meaning teachers are not equipped to deal with that from day one to day two. The other facts about consolidation, Eric said it as well, it has to be cooperative. You've got to get districts to agree. Part of what we're dealing with on the cost side is the very high cost of labor. Okay? Let's think as a community. We're going to create a district of 4, 5 current districts. Anybody here want to negotiate with that union? Because now you're not talking 3,000 students, you're not talking 7,000 students, you might be talking 20,000 students. One contract. So consolidation, I don't think is going to happen in a short enough time frame. I don't think the dollars are there. That's the other issue. We need to save $20 million. Okay? A couple assistant superintendents, maybe we close a building. That's not adding up to $20 million. So just like a business merger, hey, I want Eric to buy my company. How you doing? Well, we're losing money. We'll make it up on volume. Maybe not so much. The dollars don't work. The concentration of poverty makes it worse in the surrounding area. And the issues of union contracts and all this stuff, to me, make it not feasible. This is, again, my personal opinion. Transform school district. It's been an interesting road there in terms of some multiple options coming to the table. Tomorrow evening, there will be an internal option that is put forward. PFM is looking at that. And it's really the same litmus test. If there's going to be an internal option, back to some of the points Eric made, my question is, well, what's the educational model? Why is it going to be better? What's going to be different? And let's get a benchmark. So if we say, well, we're going to use the XYZ model and it works in Pittsburgh, that's great. Let's take a look at that. How's the health and safety and discipline? Well, we're going to use a different model. Okay, got that. Let's talk about cost. Well, we need to add some teachers. Okay, $17 million is now $20 million. How are we going to do that? And it's very clear from the beginning, the union is well aware that if there is not an internal model, there's a charter model, and we'll talk about how that's going to work in a minute. So they did come to the table with a willingness for concessions. Order of magnitude of concessions would be approximately their fringe rate, and for those of you who have businesses and understand fringe rate, school district in the city of New York is right now 60%, and in some positions over 100%. So their fringes are over 100% of wages, they average 60%. Fringe rate would get cut to 30%, which is more of an industry business average, and wages would probably be cut somewhere around 10 or 15% with some opportunities for performance bonuses. So here's the deal. If we want an internal option and it's going to match the business sustainability and do the things we want to do educationally, you need a 50% wage cut, you need 10 to 15%, 50% fringe cut, 10 to 15% labor. And by the way, one of the reasons that charter schools work is the accountability piece. We want one-year contracts. Because if you've got a teacher for 25 years who's a great teacher, that's a wonderful thing. If you've got a teacher that has 5 years in and is a horrible teacher, is it possible to get rid of them? Yes. Does it happen? No. And interestingly enough there are frankly legislative options and law that really prevents, even if the teachers wanted to do that, they're sort of prevented to do it because you can't, in the union contract, negotiate your rights away under the Pennsylvania state law. So the internal option is an uphill battle, but the parameters have been framed. And honestly, if we can get those things, an internal option would be very good. But I want to paint a picture for you of a charter model that hopefully dispels and differentiates what Eric talked about the current perception and reality of the charter schools in New York. So here's a model, and number one, I'm going to start with Caterpillar. So let's talk about Caterpillar. What did Caterpillar do? 10 years ago, Caterpillar had sales probably a fifth of what they are today. So Caterpillar sales have five-folded. Their employees have been cut in half. They've done that because they've outsourced all of the labor. There's still a cat icon. It's still a yellow tractor. The engineers still take responsibility for design. So this is about, do we want to relinquish our responsibility and authority to charter schools, or do we want to become the engineers, the definers of how education is made? And when we put a Bearcat graduation William Penn diploma, it's our diploma. It is not a KIPP diploma. It is not a Thaxton diploma. It is a William Penn diploma, just as Caterpillar has their brand. So it's our school. We're going to take responsibility for our school. So how are we going to do that? Some of the things that this story is different from, Eric, is the magnet versus geography. And there's still pros and cons. This is not, hasn't been decided. I'm just throwing it out as an example. The magnet school, the issue with that is now we've got people picking and choosing. And you say, well, isn't that good? It sort of is, but when it comes to special ed, it doesn't work so good. Because that's one of the issues we have right now, is the charter schools are taking the student who can barely be classified as special ed, and they get $23,000 for that student versus $8,000. And when that $23,000 leaves the district, we got a big problem. The geography model says, here's the school, here's the geography, here are your students, deal with it. Okay. So there's what's called a Renaissance model in Philadelphia, and this is the way it works. School fails in Philadelphia. This has been operating for about 5 or 6 years. The school is put under Renaissance. The school district has what I call a supply chain management group. They shortlist and set provisional contracts with a small number of charter schools. Could be Propel, could be KIPP, could be Mastery, but the negotiations are done at the school district level. When a school fails, they go to that school and they say, you need to form an advisory council because we need to do something differently. The advisory council is over 50% parents, and the advisory council's job is within that short list that has been pre-approved by the district, you select your charter provider because you, the parents, know best. And by the way, once you've selected it, you're going to manage it. Those contracts have built-in performance clauses so that unless you achieve what you say, you will not maintain your charter. And there are very specific rules on if you promise something to this advisory council and you do not do it. So you say, we're going to give everybody computers. If it doesn't happen, you lose your charter. So it's a significantly aggressive model on the supply chain side to qualify people to set the agreements so that they are performance bound. And at the same time, it really gives more control at a community level because now this advisory council is actually making the selection and managing the charter school. The dollars on charter schools work. And they work for a couple reasons. Number one, at the heart, the wages are lower. Plain and simple. It's a market wage, and from what we've determined when we look at what we can afford to pay per student, it is equal or above what the national charter schools are paying in Philadelphia. So do we know when we put an RFP out that we're going to get 5 people to bid on it? No. But we believe we will, and we also believe an advantage in this case is kind of first in, because other than New Orleans, there is no district that we're aware of anywhere that is 100% charter. So the dollars work. The funding formula is absolutely flawed, but at the point in time you become 100% charter, there's what I would call kind of back doors. You can charge an administrative fee, you can charge a rent, and there's also a provision under Act 41 that you can voluntarily, as the charter provider, pay down debt. So now you've got a negotiation process. Here are 2 charter schools, what can you do for us? But almost by definition, the dollars work. And the legislative delegation has been very supportive. They have requested meetings to talk with the Chief Recovery Officer to say, what can we do for you? And at the end of the day, I think with PFM, we have constructed a model that would be a better charter formula that would be for Act 41 school districts. So we may actually be able to do better there, but if there are no changes, it still works. If we have a performance contract, if we have one-year contracts with the teachers, if we have a one-year a wage contract, we believe we can get the educational accountability because of the proven track record. We believe we can get the safety and discipline, and we believe we can get the dollars with the charter school. And if we go to the advisory council, we believe we can actually get a stronger accountability at the neighborhood level and a much stronger accountability with parents. So, our timeline to finish up here is a lot of what's being presented here tonight. Genevieve and others, I think Genevieve is the only advisory committee member here. If I've forgotten someone, I apologize. But she will hear a lot of this, only she'll hear it from PFM and their analysis. Wednesday is our advisory committee. There's a public forum Thursday. And then by the end of the month, we have one more advisory committee meeting. Really starting at the beginning of April, we're going to start writing the recovery plan. And the recovery plan will go to the school board April 17. As early as May 15, the school board could adopt it. And I would say my largest concern at this point in time, because I think, frankly, we have two very viable alternatives. I think the internal option with some of the developments this week, I think is getting better, and I think we have a better chance of an internal option. I'm still with the Renaissance model or the magnet model. I think that can go. And just one thing I forgot, in the Renaissance model, they debated this for-profit or not-for-profit. And they decided, well, why would we want to limit it in the first place? And so they allowed for-profits and not-for-profits on the short list. The parents started with an absolute prejudice against the for-profits. And when all of the negotiations were done, they went about 50-50, profit and not-for-profit. I go to the JCC, Lauren might go to Gold's Gym. You know what? It's both physical fitness and one's for-profit and one's not-for-profit. So we'll go to the school board in May. One of my concerns is really where Eric started, and I'll end. And that is the school board has been different from any other board that I have dealt with. I will tell you, in my opinion, in the school board meetings that I have attended, and I've probably, between pre-committee and committee and board meetings, I've probably now attended 24 hours of school board meetings. And if we go to the balanced scorecard and we say the premise of this organization is we are not doing well educationally, we are not a safe and healthy school, and we are failing financially, I will tell you that less than 5% of the time that has been spent in those 24 hours has been on any of those subjects. There is not a regular projection of finances. There's no discussion on what can be done. Those issues are not discussed. So I have some severe concerns about the school board going forward to say, can we concentrate on what's important, and can we make good decisions? And I will end, and there is a backdrop behind that, which is, who is this guy? He's not from the city, and there is a strong desire that it's only going to be those folks from the city that are involved with this organization going forward. So, recovery plan will be completed, hopefully, by the April meeting, voted on in May, and hopefully we can define a new direction and get some community cooperation that will, whether it's an advisory board, or it's a board, or it's a receiver, regardless of what the structure is, it really can move forward in a way that all three of those can improve. Thank you.
Questions? Yes.
Dave, can you remind us what your authority is. So after you submit to the board, how long do they have to consider your proposal? You know, what happens if they choose to reject your proposal?
The question is, what happens and where's the authority? There are really three things that can happen. So here's the plan. First thing is they can say, we want to do this. And if that's what they say, whatever mechanism is in the plan to make it happen would be implemented. The second thing that they can say is, we don't like it. In that case, the authority is very clear. Literally, a receiver is appointed, and pretty much neither the board nor the superintendent now has any authority, and the receiver has pretty much 100% authority. The third option is, well, we'll think about it. And they can think about it for all but a year, and that one gets a little ticklish because the state can kind of threaten to withhold money, and there's some things that can happen, but that's kind of the purgatory. So basically, if they say yes, it's implemented, and the recovery officer's role is to make sure it's implemented with no direct authority. If it's rejected, the receiver is appointed, and then there is full authority.
Are there advantages to it being a receiver as opposed to,
well,
or what's the difference?
If you're trying to get her done, and you're trying to get her done quick, a receiver seems like it's the right approach. I would consider that a failure. And I guess that's primarily because I started out in this process, and I still believe that if reasonable people come together and facts and data and options are put on the table, regardless of where we live or what our background is, we would still come to the same conclusion. And from that regard, it would be a failure. So I still have a very strong desire to make sure that the administration, the board, the advisory committee, the public says, you know what, at the end of the day, this is better. And as all of you in the community hear all this stuff going on, and they say, well, that 100% charter, just, what are they talking about? I encourage you to say, or what? Because that's the question. Because doing what we're doing is taking failure and making it more costly. So over the next 2 weeks, as you contemplate that, let me know. Because if there's an option we haven't considered, we want to know about it. But right now, it's about or what.